Hello guys, it's Maciek from Sprechfensterblog. I got a new thing recently and I would like to share some observations about it. The thing is a piece of period clothing, namely a replica doublet provided by Spes, historical fencing gear, a renowned company. The interesting feature of it is that it, as you can see, is quite tight fitting, and it actually takes some 6 centimeters off my waist. And this feature, this corset-like feature, was also common in period clothing, and for good reasons apparently, as a properly shaped body was instrumental to wearing armor. This is a story for another time and would be told much better by others, so let us only mark that both iconography of armor and actual museum specimens routinely sport very narrow waists. It is also known that in the 14th century and later, civilian clothing was heavily inspired by military attire, and burghers used to fashion themselves as knights. An interesting evidence that this fashioning included tightening their waists with corsets come from the so-called Trachtenbuch by an Augsburg burgher, Matthias Schwarz. Roughly a contemporary to Paulus Hector Mayer, Schwarz documented the different clothes he wore over a period of 40 years, with new entries coming every several months or even weeks. Interestingly, at one point, he noted that he got fat and had himself portrayed naked. As you can see, he indeed lacks a wasp's waist needed to fit a proper breastplate. But roughly half a year later, he does just that, and his grape-shaped silhouette is no more. But is it? I dare say that this before and after effect was achieved with some help from clothing. Such tricks were certainly known, as attested already by a French knight and chronicler, Geoffroy de Charny. What is more, it is not enough for them to be as God made them. They are not content with themselves as they are, but they gird themselves up so rein themselves in round the middle of the body, and they seek to deny the existence of the stomachs which God has given them. And even without their armor, they are so constructed and strapped up that they cannot undertake anything, for they cannot bend down, nor engage in any other sports requiring strength or agility. Indeed, they can hardly sit down. With all these accounts and other pieces of evidence, it seemed reasonable to me to expect that clothing could have some important impact on how martial technique was designed back in the day and how it was enacted in practice. And therefore, I decided to incorporate moving in period clothing, training in it, into my own research. So, how is it to fight girded up with your waist circumference squeezed by 6 centimeters or even more? Let's find out. As you could see, I could move. I could, in fact, move quite dynamically and fight. Also, I received several thrusts, and this revealed another nice feature of this period clothing, that it tended to have its front part heavily padded to create the so-called chicken breast visual effect, but also this probably was imitation of functional features of military attire, which inspired civilian clothing at the time, as I already mentioned, and also this corset-like feature, the tightening of the lower parts of the torso, the lower core, affected the way I felt during moving, and also affected the way I moved by simply restricting my range of motion in this area. And in short, the result was that my stance tended to gravitate more towards an upright posture with balance more evenly distributed between the legs, and with my knees rather straight. It didn't mean, of course, that I didn't move the way I move in my normal sparring gear, but there was a clear tendency visible upon analyzing the footage that I have collected so far. And interestingly, this also seems to correspond to differences in how fencers are portrayed in the fight books, especially the earlier fight books, for instance by Paulus Kahl, against the later ones, such as Mayer's treatise, or for example Hans Talhofer's fight book. And what's also interesting in Talhofer's fight book is that the fencers there are portrayed with their doublets unfastened, open, whereas in Paulus Kahl we see fencers buttoned up with their doublets closed and tightly fitting. So perhaps there is something there. Perhaps the way clothing affected models posing for these illustrations was different because of how they wore their doublets. But of course that's just a hypothesis. For a somewhat more thorough commentary, please feel invited to visit my blog at Patreon. It's also made a public post, so accessible to all. Moreover, while comparing illustrations in these two roughly contemporary fight books, that of Paulus Kahl and Hans Talhofer, I also came to appreciate and understand why Talhofer's figures show fencers with their doublets open. Because on a hot day, as right now in the summer, being buttoned up all the way with such tight-fitting clothing made of wool, you quickly become very hot during fighting. But this is not the greatest problem. The greatest problem is that after you're done with fighting and you're all sweaty and hot, it's actually quite hard to take it off. And it took me excruciating 12 minutes to untie and take off my doublet. So yeah, that part was no fun, and I clearly understand why they preferred to fence without their doublets or with their doublets partly open. That would be it for now. Thanks for watching. Keep up the good work, and now go and give your HEMA some practice. Cheers.